my last presentation on Meet Magento Poland and on PHPers in Poland, I had mission to show that Magento has some specific rules, something that we should be aware of, and we should follow these rules to improve our quality of products. Now, my second mission for this year, and I think that's the last one for this year, is continuous integration. So let's start with introducing myself. I'm Łukasz Bajsarowicz. I'm working with Magento for 2 years at the moment, and I was working with PHP over 8 years, and my career development got really fast when I joined Magento community. And currently my main job is like developing for merchants, but as an extra job, I do the trainings for Magento developers, and I meet different people. I see different issues that they have, and with the most of the issues they have, it can be fixed really easy way, and that's why I'm here today. That's why I'm talking about continuous integration. So what actually is continuous integration? How many people are working with continuous integration environment? How many of you have it in your company? Okay, so it's good audience to just introduce that for you. So continuous integration is often misunderstood. It's very often like people don't remember that graph I'm just showing, this diagram, and during our development we have several stages. One stage is just developing, writing code. Second one, even in PHP, we have building. We are building the application. We are for PHP, building happens when we compile the UI, when we deploy static content. It's building the application, and then for this is continuous development. So we develop, we just open our application, so it's building. But continuous integration includes tests. So we write code, we build the application, and then we test if it works properly. So if it's done automatically, we call it continuous integration. And by continuous integration, I mean not only to test and leave the code as is, but also merge to the branch, release branch. What is more, we can extend continuous integration by adding extra step, which is release, to continuous delivery. So with continuous delivery, you automatically prepare the releases of the software. So you have complete builds that you know if you deploy, it will work on production. And last one is continuous deployment. I don't remember, but probably that was Booking.com, who has like several hundred releases a day. So that's the goal to achieve for us, for developers, to be so sure about our code, so sure about our quality, that we will deploy application without even, let's say, manual tests before each release. So I hope that you will remember that slide, and you will not misunderstood that in the future, saying to your boss that you want continuous integration, and you will explain them that it's not a rocket science, it's not about deployment, it's just about having the continuous code continuously merged to the master branch, or just release branch. Okay, so how it works? It works like team is developing code and they are pushing it to GitHub. Git repository, just version control system. And then you create pull requests, or if you commit to specific branches, you can configure your CI environment to just run the test each time when commit happens on specific branches. So for my purpose, it's I create pull request, or I commit to pull request, and it triggers continuous integration tool. Then continuous integration tool builds the environment, so it prepares the PHP, it prepares the MySQL if it's necessary, and then it runs the tests. And if we have failed our development, if the code is not working properly, you will get very quick feedback about the issues with your code. That's what is broken and what are the conditions. If you look into Magento 2 repository, you can see the Travis .travis file, which is configuration for one of the tools that is for continuous integration. And you can see that there is even matrix of PHP versions used for continuous integration. So you can have application tested in multiple versions of PHP, in multiple conditions. So you can have information where it broke and what is broken. And if the code is properly written and it doesn't have any errors, you just have feedback to the maintainer. And we have continuous integration, so we will be sure that the code is working. And maintainer can just decide to merge it to the master branch. And yeah, that's the last step: review and merge. If functionally it's working, and if it's about the time to merge it, just maintainer merge it. And yeah, so that's all for the theory, and I hope it was not a rocket science yet. We have to be aware that on the market we have several solutions available, and my point was to show you the main popular ones and the easiest to introduce, to implement in your company. So you may know Jenkins. Jenkins is just superhero of CI tools, like everyone knows Jenkins. But he's not the only one. He can serve you well, but he requires resources to set up, to configure. So you should know that you have also cloud services like Travis CI, like CircleCl. You can use also GitLab pipelines for continuous integration, for introducing continuous integration. You can use Bamboo, which is from Bitbucket owners. It's Atlassian, yeah. And TeamCity, which is developed by guys from JetBrains, so quite close to PHP Storm. Yeah, but for me, the choice was CircleCi. CircleCi is a cloud-based solution, and its benefits are the fact that it's cloud-based, so you don't have to have your own resources. You don't have to have your AWS instances. You don't have to take care about the dedicated servers or something. You just can run it as is. It has free plan even for commercial use. So even if you're working if you're working with the project for your client, you can introduce the continuous integration using CircleCi. And the thing that really helps me is just SSH debug, because sometimes you run Docker to run your application, something happens, and the messages from Magento are really generic. Like it happens several times that I haven't had some library in for PHP, and the message was very generic, like some integration test failed, and there was a line of execution of this external library, but there was no feedback what happened. So SSH debug is quite fine. It's quite easy because it displays you at the end of the test the whole line of SSH that you just copy to your command line, and you can connect immediately without any extra effort. For me, it's partially a problem or not, but CircleCI out of the box works with GitHub and Bitbucket. So if you have own repository of GitLab, which is quite popular recently after Microsoft buying GitHub, that's most of companies, especially in Poland, moved to own repositories in GitLab. So you have to do the extra effort to connect the GitLab to the CircleCI. Anyway, it's doable. So another thing is it's based on Docker. You can run your Docker images. If you are using for development Docker images, you can use them also for continuous integration. But CircleCI also offers you the virtual machine. You can have VM for running your tests. So you have a raw Ubuntu instance, and then you can install everything you need. Then you can install the image and just run your tests. But the fastest for me is Docker. And I mentioned that it has free plan. The free plan is it supports unlimited repos. It supports unlimited users, so you are not limited by the amount of developers at the team. But the only limitation is 1,000 build minutes per month. So if you're running the project and you have multiple checks, it can be problem. But I will mention that in next slide, in next step, because it has the cheapest solution, which is $50 USD monthly, and then you have unlimited repos, unlimited users, and unlimited builds minutes per month. But you have only just 2 containers, so you can just do the 2 builds simultaneously. So you can have only 2 concurrent jobs. So let's get started. You may notice that I really like Audi. Okay. So to run continuous integration, you have to do some amends to your repository. You have to add one single file to your repository, which is CircleCi directory and its config file. And I pointed out 2 things there, because usually I see on a project that people keep in their code base, in their GitHub repositories, multiple directories and files that are auto-generated. So you have to be aware that during the Composer install, most of the stuff is generated by Magento, and you don't have to keep it in the repository. You can find the blog post from Gise Reitsma from Netherlands. He mentions the best configuration of a git ignore file. Just to let you know that the only directories you really need is like app, dev, and composer, JSON composer log files. This CircleCI setup looks like you see on the screen. You configure in the most easygoing way. You configure it just to build the application. You provide which Docker images are used, and in CircleCI it works like you have access to the first listed image. So if I point PHP as a first image, I will be able to connect that image through SSH, and I will be able to connect to it by HTTP. That's something that we will need later on. And then we can put multiple images that are built together on one virtual machine for our continuous integration pipeline. And another configuration value is a working directory, because you can have multiple images that are creating multiple folders, and you want to just set the working directory to one of them. And then there is quite clear that we have steps that we want to run, and the steps we have checkout. So if the build is triggered by commit or by pull request, it checks out from the repository the code that is applicable to this specific continuous integration pipeline. Second thing is installing. Oh, sorry. 1 second. Second one is running composer install, which just sets up our application, fulfills the dependencies that we need to run our application. And that's the theory. But in fact, it doesn't work this way. The first error in our pipeline you will notice just after installing it. It's difficult. You might spend a long time investigating, but I will make it easier. You just have to customize Docker image that is provided by CircleCi. So I extend the CircleCi PHP image. And you might notice stretch node browsers that will be imported later. I just extend this image. I add the libraries that are missing in the basic image from CircleCi, and then I install MySQL client into the Docker image, because for later tests, Magento uses bash commands like MySQL dump for integration tests. But for now, it's just something that you need. I share that on my GitHub, so later on I will just give you a link to it. And and we changed our CircleCi config to point our new Docker image. You can use auto build of Docker Hub, so you will have immediately new Docker image to use it. And now you have first success. So you just committed to the repository, the build is run, we are green. Amazing. So Magento was let's say run. So what we have green 4 steps that are related with setting up the dependencies. But it's not running Magento. It's not running any tests. So let's perform some unit tests. And the best way for the beginning is just copy-paste of the dist files and create your own PHP unit.xml files. So you can see that I limit my tests only to app code directory. It's quite important because you don't want to test if Magento core works properly. I mean, if they didn't broke anything with their update. You just want to test your developer. You want to test your code. And running the tests is quite easy because you remember from 3-4 slides before that we have these steps, and it's checkout run. So now for us it's just adding new run, and it's vendor bin PHP unit. We provide the configuration dev test unit PHP unit, and we are green. It works. It's just so easy. So another step accomplished, and you are running the unit test. So it's quite beneficial, and it didn't take more than 1 hour to set it up. So if you get back to your companies, you can just implement that in 1 hour. Another thing, are static tests. And I mentioned that I just copy-pasted this file, I remove all the unnecessary stuff, and I leave only the test I want to perform. But static tests test all the environment. So even if you want to test upcode scope of code quality, you will be testing whole Magento. Adding this test is like pretty same like with unit tests, and it should run quite fine, but it's not. You can see the time here. Yes, 4 minutes, 31 seconds. And it's because of the fact that it's testing all the code scope, not only our code. So it's kind of problematic because Magento Core still have some code that it's not properly formatted, that they include, for example, PayPal plugin, which is cross-site scripting vulnerable. So our static tests will return you false negative that your code is broken, but it's not, it's Magento code broken. So I choose temporary, unless Magento fix the issues, unless we fix the issues during the contribution, to run each step separately. And I don't want to lose information what was wrong. I want to have this information in the build history. So I just run these commands, PHP unit, dev test, static PHP unit, and then I select the specific test suites. But instead of just breaking the step with the fact that the build is broken, I just do the logical OR exit 0, which is like saying to CircleCi that this command run properly. And that's temporary workaround. You can look several times in following weeks if the basic command ran without any issues, and then you can just remove this exit 0. For the moment, it's better to run it like it's here. And very important is that static tests, we split for four kind of tests. Coding standard verification, which checks if you have the right amount of spaces, if you have the right formatting of the colons, if you have the right formatting of the parentheses, etc. Second one is XSS unsafe output test. So every time when you build your templates, you have to escape the output, because otherwise you will be vulnerable to just cross-site scripting attack. And I remember Ricardo's presentation last year that it doesn't matter if you're black, white, yellow, or purple. Sooner or later, someone will use the vulnerability. So you have to remember that to look at this cross-site scripting as unsafe test. And last, I want to mention is less static code analysis. To be honest, I'm not sure what it checks. I'm not sure, but I just included that because it was out of the box. Sometimes when you run tests, you will run out of memory, especially with this static tests, because you saw that it's running 4 minutes, so it's using tremendous amount of memory. So in this specific case, you have to add just memory limit condition, memory limit flag to your job. And another thing that's quite useful for emails notifying about the errors, that you can name each task. So instead of having run and the comment immediately, you can have run and the configuration of it, like the name and the command you want to run. And commands can be multi-line. That's quite important. You will see why. Second thing for these annotations is that you can use cache. So you don't have to build the dependencies each time when you run your pipeline. You can just restore the cache if it exists, and you check the cache by some preconditions. I use precondition of checksum for composer JSON file, and if there are new caches to save, I just save them with save cache instruction in this CircleCi config file. And you can see that that whole process can take like building the Magento can take like 2-3 seconds thanks to that. And pull requests that are created with the use of CircleCi after checking, after validation, running pipeline looks like this. So you have information at the bottom of this pull request that it failed, and it shows you that it's related with CircleCi build. But to get more information, you just click details, and it moves you to CircleCi page. Yeah, and by default, the merge is blocked after failing the test. So even if someone is concerned about errors in the code and wants to merge that, he is not able, because GitHub blocks that feature, blocks that possibility to maintainer. And we had with Bernard. Bernard is working with me. We had some situation when our outsourcing developer called our office saying that he wouldn't commit anymore because we are not merging his code. But his code was throwing fatal errors, and we couldn't even technically merge his code. But he called our bosses to say that we are against him and we don't want to merge his code anyway. So we just showed, sorry, we cannot merge it. It's technically impossible. And then he just passed away, and finally passed away after 2 months from the company. So yeah, that's good. And finally, there are some extra checks I really like, but I think that Igor is more common to them, because we have extra checks from Extension Developer Network, and it's developed by community recently, I think since last year. But this Extension Developer Network is an organization that collects together the developers of extensions, like I don't remember the names, but I don't want to mislead someone. Anyway, it's an organization that keeps together extension providers, and they set up their own rules, because Magento core rules are quite different than the rules that you have to implement for your extension that you are selling on marketplace. And if you are writing code that it will be reused across the projects, it's good to have Extension Developer Network, PHP, code sniffer implemented. So it's quite easy, like you see, another line to our scenarios to just run PHP CS with the standard provided by External Developer Network. And at the end, you will see space app code. So once again, I want to limit that only to our code, because Magento for sure will fail it, but it's not because it's wrong, but it's not written in the standard of extensions. And yeah, and another thing you can check is something that shows you if some condition in SAS files are broken, or if your JSON, if your JavaScript files are wrongly included. You can just run setup static content deploy during the pipeline. It will show you if there are some issues with compiling that. You can limit that to the same conditions that you run your production deployment. And yeah, so maybe I will stop there for a minute. That's all you need to have for the beginning. So you see, it's like 3 or 4 checks, and you are more sure, more convinced that your code will work properly. Later on, you can implement another things like there is coverage tool for GitHub that expects to have increasing coverage of the tests. There are other tools that are running other static checks. You can set up in your organization some rules for static checks. So that's all you want. You can just implement in one day. That you just set the responsible person, or you go to your boss and you're saying, I spent one day to improve our internal workflow. And I hope that you will do it if you don't have continuous integration yet. So yeah, let's go. Let's go to another OD in the background. You can also use the pipelines, the continuous integration, to test the release. Not only test the code that is committed, the pull request, but you can also test the release that you are preparing to put on production. And by testing the release, I mean something that it's really, really costful. It's really expensive for running, so we cannot do it every time. And first thing is just setting up the Magento. It's no longer the static test without running the code. It's just building Magento, installing Magento, and that's why I mentioned about multi-line commands, because here it's really helpful. You can use environmental variables, but here you can just install Magento, and then when you have Magento installed, you can just add another step, which is continuous integration. And continuous integration is pretty the same to set up like unit tests by just running PHP unit. The only thing that I noticed in my pipelines is the problem with memory limit, because integration tests run really often out of the memory. So you can switch the memory limit to -1, which means unlimited, and it will handle it itself. That if the process is running out of memory, he stops the one process and runs another to just keep the tests running until the end. And yeah, I mentioned that it takes long, so you can grab another cup of coffee and test the release. Another thing you can do is just run acceptance testing. And there was a conference last year, MageTestFest in Amersfoort in Netherlands, focused on one tool that Magento introduced, but then kind of forgot it. And now it's getting back to the game. I committed to commits during the contribution day yesterday to improve that tool. Acceptance testing by Magento Functional Testing Framework (MFTF) just clicks using Selenium, clicks the specific. Just clicks the application like the customer using the real browser. Currently, Magento Functional Testing Framework use only Chrome, but in the future they are introducing other browsers that are supported by WebDrivers. Anyway, installing that, it's another easy step, but you will have great job to configure the stack behind it. To run this acceptance testing, you will just enter the directory of that, you install the dependencies, and then by command robo functional, you generate the tests from XML to PHP to be run later. And by design, it should work like you provide the Magento-based URL and you provide the credentials for running the application. And in theory, you should be able to run the application, to record even the tests, and see that this tool is clicking different stuff, like adding the product, then it tries to order that product with frontend. So it tests also backend and frontend. Backend, I mean admin panel, and frontend. And it clicks each button, it fills the forms and checks if the validations works. So it's in theory, it should work, but it's not. And Magento released that to version 2.26, but with one huge problem. The loader of the tests loads tests only from app code, and the tests that are written already for testing the orders, so testing the admin panel, are not running. So for me, it's a great issue, because I want to extend the existing tests instead of writing the whole scope from the scratch. And I've been promised yesterday that for 2.3 it will work. I hope that it will be backported to 2.7, and we will be able to run in our pipelines, in our continuous, let's say, deployment process, even the functional tests with Selenium. Yeah, so that's all about the pipelines. I'd love to hear your questions.
Thank you.